Hi everyone, and welcome to Dollhouse Drama. My name is Mimi, and my husband has very kindly gifted me the Vermont Junior Doll's House kit. So we're going to start building it. I'm not very good at reading instructions. I kind of do my own thing. So let's see how it goes. The first thing I did was remove everything from the box and pulled out the instructions. Honestly, the instructions, they were about as useless as the letter G in the word lasagna. Let's move on and wing it. I'm sure there's a system in here somewhere. Now, I do recognize three pieces. The sides, the front, things that look vaguely architectural. So we're going to start with those. We're not completely lost. First of all, I used a tack cloth to remove all the dust. Warning, don't try this at home. I had some butcher's paper and I thought that would be perfect to stop the paint from going onto my work table. Was not a good idea because the paper stuck to the paint and then it took me forever to sand it all back down and get it off. So don't do that. Use parchment paper instead. That worked really well and you'll see me use that later. Moving on, I'm using a primer. It's just a white primer. I'm putting very, very thin layers on. And it's just going to help the coloured paint adhere and it will go on nice and smooth. I do go in the direction of the siding, up and down. And I just cover the whole piece. There we go. And then I repeat with the front and the other side. Very easy. And then we just make sure we let it dry thoroughly. Once I've done the primer on all three exterior pieces, I use a 220 sanding block and I just go along the same direction as the siding and get any lumps or bumps or additional extra paint that should not be there off and get it super smooth. And I really wouldn't skip any of these steps because it really does show on your finish. And once again, I'm using the yellow tack cloth to pull up any leftover dust so I've got a nice clean finish before I put on the second coat. In hindsight, I probably didn't need a second coat of primer because I still want to put a colour on the top. However, I did and it still looks great. So here's me applying a second coat and I'm doing exactly the same as before. Once everything was nice and dry, I did give it another sand and another dust. And now we're going to flip them over and we're going to do the interior. Now the front did have a lot of paint on there. I had to sand all of that off before I even started. And then primer on the front. Ta-da! And again, I repeated the process for the interior sides of the exterior sides. Does that make sense? Now let's talk colour palette, because this is where I did actually have a vision. All colours are from Benjamin Moore, and I'm going to use pale almond, white dove, rose dust, a hint of mauve and deep mauve. I had a very clear idea of how this was going to look. And for the downstairs of the doll's house, we are going to start with pale almond. And I think I'm going to use this in the upper space, the attic space as well. And I can always change it once I've got it in, but I think these are the colours I really want. Now for the second floor, we're going to go in with a hint of mauve. However, I may have accidentally used a hint of mauve where I did intend to use rose dust. We are not calling it a mistake. We're calling it a design detour. And honestly, at this point, we're just going with it. I can always change it once it's put up. And not to sound like a broken record, but you sand it, dust it, and put a second coat on. I forgot to film it, but the exterior of all of the framing I did paint in White Dove by Benjamin Moore. All right, so after all that painting, sanding, and dust removal, it's time for 2 coats of polyacrylic, because nothing says I put my soul into this like sealing it under a layer of clear plastic so it can survive the apocalypse. For the first coat, you seriously need a very thin, even layer. Let it dry completely. Don't rush this. Go pet your cat. Check if your plants are still alive. Maybe remember you have a family. Once it's dry, sand it lightly, just enough to knock down any tiny nibs or dust specks that landed like uninvited guests. Wipe everything down again with the tack cloth. This thing's basically a sticky superhero for dust at this point. Then coat number 2. This one's the victory lap. This will ensure that your dollhouse is now officially ready for hypothetical floods or your nephews. I wonder what happens if I poke it with this phase. I dug deep back into that wood pile, and this time I discovered these must be the floors. But I am turning them over, and now they're going to be the ceilings. And I do want to paint the ceilings, and I'm thinking I'm also going to do this in the Dove White. But first of all, we need to prime. This time I just did 1 coat of prime. I just wanted to see how it would go. Then sanding, because apparently that's what we do now. Dust off, and then I put on Dove White. Sand again, and at this point, I think I've done more prep than building. In fact, I haven't done any building. We need to work on that right now. And it did take 2 coats of Dove White. Next! Okay, I opened up one of the little boxes that was in the kit, and I found all these little pieces of wood, which I can only assume would be window frames. But I do need to stain them. Yes, I did lightly sand them first. I just want them nice and smooth. I've seen all over YouTube various people using painter's tape with the sticky side up, and then it holds everything nice and steady, so it makes it so much easier to stain. I think I'm using a special walnut oil-based stain, and I chose oil-based because I don't want any of the wood to kind of warp, and I thought a water-based might kind of make it a little bit bendy. So I apply 1 coat, let it soak in for about 2 or 3 minutes, then I wipe it off. I did not film this, with lint-free cloth, and then I applied a 2nd coat and let that dry. While those are drying, I work on the inside window frames. These I wanted them in Dove White, so I put 1 coat on, I let that dry, I sand, wipe off all the dust, and then I apply a 2nd coat. Oh my gosh, how long has this taken so far? Oh my God.
It's been 84 years.
Once I finished 2 coats of paint, I then apply 2 coats of polyacrylic, and I did that on the stain and on the White Dove inside frames. Now we have the front door. This time I did something just slightly different. I actually applied a wood conditioner onto the door because it was so dry, to help the stain kind of go on more evenly. I do wish that I did this with the outside of the window frames, because the stain colour is so much more even. So I applied the stain, I let it soak in for about 20 minutes, Then with a lint-free cloth or rag, I remove any excess oil that is left on there, and I let it dry. And I let it dry for about maybe half an hour to an hour. I put on the first coat of stain, let it soak in for about 3 minutes, wiped off the excess, let it dry completely, and then I applied another coat of stain. And then when that was completely dry, it was actually the following day, I added 2 coats of polyacrylic. You know the drill this time. Sand, dust, reapply. Now everything is stained and put together, I want to do a mock-up just to make sure that it does fit into the window holes on the front. Now, as soon as I put them in, I noticed I had not stained on the inside, and it's going to show. So I taped it all down, and then I just go in very, very gently and stain on the inside where you can see. I would probably suggest you take the windows back out to do this, and the reason being you don't want to get any stain on the inside of your paintwork. But this worked fine for me. Thankfully, I did not have any polyacrylic in that inside part, so the stain went on really easily, and then I put some polyacrylic on after. Now it's time to put in the windows, because I have seen people struggle with trying to assemble the windows prior to putting them into the wall, and they use rubber bands in trying to hold it all together, and it just seems so complicated. So I'm actually using a ruler, a right-angled ruler, to make sure that everything is completely straight and lined up. And then I put a tiny, tiny amount of glue on there, just enough to go all the way around the edges, but not enough where it's going to squirt out. And then I just carefully place them in. And I just do a final check to make sure everything is perfectly lined up. And it was. So now we need to repeat on the other 4 windows. I did secure the windows with just a little bit of painter's tape, just to make sure that they stayed in place while they dried. Once the exterior frames are all dried, I removed the painter's tape, and next we need to pop in the window panes. Now, you did just see me pull off that protective film on the window. I should have waited. I messed up on this one, my first attempt. So we're going to put a tiny, tiny bit of glue, because this time we've got to be even more careful with the glue, because we do not want that seeping out onto the window pane, because that will look nasty. So I insert a little bit of glue into the corners, and then I brush it around the frames. Then I carefully drop the window pane in and it fits perfectly. This is why you should leave the film on. Can you see I need to push it down while I'm putting my fingerprints all over the window. And I realised that I didn't have glue in that area. Make sure I pull it down with the glue the right side down. And then I just repeat with all the other windows. And all the other windows, I put the window panes in with the plastic backing, and I pulled the plastic backing off once I was happy and everything was all lined out. That way no fingerprints on the windows. Now we have all the glass window panes in, it's time to add the frames. Exactly the same process as the exterior, and again I use the ruler to ensure that everything is nicely lined up. And there she is. All she needs now is a front door. And this thing is starting to look like a house. And there's the front door. However, I'm not actually going to glue that in yet. That's just loose. So far, no instructions, no disasters, which honestly feels a little suspicious because in this workshop, that usually doesn't last. Anyway, stick around because I have a feeling this house is going to start having opinions very soon.
There it is. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby!